I realized this money's probably gone and I'm never going to see anything else.
It's devastating. All of your belongings are somewhere you don't know where they are.
They say the best things in life are free, but you can give them to the birds and bees. I need money. That's what I want. That's what I want. Yeah. That's what I want.
Fighting fraud is a never-ending battle for law enforcement. Do you know who has access to your credit cards? Do you know who has access to your identity? Can somebody really take over your home? On the phone, by email, or right in your face? These are just some of the ways a fraudster will approach you. Hi, I'm Tom Nachu, and this is Fraud Squad TV. We work with members of law enforcement experts in the field and members of community all across North America. We're here fighting fraud together. Each week, we'll introduce you to those who have been scammed, and we'll give you tips so that you don't become a victim of fraud. Watch, look, listen and learn, and then tell your friends and neighbors. In fact, become an expert yourself, because the more you know, the better your chances are. Don't become a victim of fraud, and if you think it can't happen to you, well, then think again. Fraud on the move. Here's a story of an assistant professor who had her belongings held for ransom by a mover who quoted her one price, but then demanded twice as much before delivering her goods. Let's take a look at this. It was 6 years ago, but a woman that we'll refer to as Anne remembers it as if it were yesterday.
I needed to move from Connecticut to Virginia to accept a teaching position.
Anne was 44 years old at the time. She was single and living alone. And so when she was offered a job 600 miles away from her Connecticut home, she soon became overwhelmed with the task of moving. But the excitement soon had her looking online for a mover.
I decided on a particular mover. I read an article in the New York Times about moving and avoiding moving scams.
Anne made a list of the movers based on the bids that she was given, and then she did what any prudent consumer would do. Once she narrowed it down to one, she thoroughly looked into that company's past.
I checked with the Department of Transportation and with the Better Business Bureau, and everything about this company checked out fine.
Everything did check out fine, but as Anne was soon to find out, she was going to have to hang on tight for the bumpy ride ahead.
We set a date for the move, and on that day, 5 movers showed up with a rented truck.
Anne felt she went about the whole process in a very smart and educated way. She looked into her options for movers. She checked out their history thoroughly, and she kept a list of all of the documents that they provided.
The majority of professional movers are a tremendous credit to their industry, and they're in the people business. They have families themselves. They have unique skills that allow them to be movers. They're not moving cantaloupes, they're not moving widgets. They're interacting with people on a daily basis and moving your things. It's a unique skill set.
We were very friendly at first. I offered water and, everything was on a friendly basis.
But as Anne tells us, a dark cloud was soon to be upon her when she was presented with the bill for the move.
The way they had quoted the move by email was a per pound charge, so that the truck could be weighed and I would be charged per pound. And they estimated how many pounds I might have.
But that estimate lasted only until all of her belongings were loaded and locked inside the truck.
Once the things were locked on the truck, they claimed that they were going to charge me by cubic foot. And they claimed that I had much more than what the inventory had shown, and then presented me with a bill that was more than twice the estimate that they had given me by email.
Ann tells us that when she was presented with the new estimate, she made one request.
I told them that I'd been quoted by pound, and I asked them to go to a weigh station on the highway and weigh the truck and give me the weight ticket so that I could pay that way when they delivered the goods. And they said okay. But in the end, they didn't end up doing that at all. It's devastating.
Sadly, Ann's story is not unique. There's a website called movingscam.com that's dedicated to helping people out who have suffered this type of fraud. In fact, they tell us that in July alone of last year, they received 120 complaints.
Dishonest, disreputable companies who come out and they underbid to get the job. Then once they've loaded everything up and they've got everything secure in their truck, they say, well, we thought it was going to take 3 men, 1 truck, 6 hours, but it took 4 men, 8 hours, and this, that, and the other thing, and now the price has doubled.
Ann did manage to get her belongings back.
They ended up delivering the belongings, and I had to pay the inflated amount in cash. A few months later, the New York City police, the mover was based in New York, the New York City police contacted me by letter, apparently because they had gotten so many complaints about this one company that they couldn't ignore it anymore, and they teamed up with the Department of Transportation to go after this mover. So they were arrested, and they served a couple of months in jail.
Ann has decided to help other people who are faced with the prospect of hiring a mover.
We have a consumer advocacy website called movingscam.com, and first of all, we try to prevent this from happening to people. Probably the best thing to do is just go by word of mouth. Use a mover that someone you know has already used and found to be reputable.
Movingscam.com maintains a list of blacklisted movers, but Ann warns that we should all thoroughly check out our mover, ask around, make sure that they've got a good reputation. Lots of fraudulent movers change their names all the time so as to avoid that bad reputation. Ann chose to remain anonymous for this piece because of the threats that fraudsters make towards people who expose them. But it didn't stop her from telling her story and warning all of us. Well, Craig Hannaford, it's now the 21st century. People have been moving for a long time. Surely, at this time and date, there's ways to prevent this type of fraud.
Well, it exists because people aren't doing their due diligence. If you're going to hire a mover, you have to do a few checks before you sign on the dotted line. The best thing you can do is to make the proper checks of the moving companies that you're hiring.
Craig Hannaford, thanks a lot for looking into this for us. We'll be right back with more Fraud Squad TV. It could come by mail, fax, or email. It's called the Nigerian letter, or the 419, which is named after the penal code in Nigeria. The scam's been in existence for over 25 years. It originated from Nigeria, but now it comes from many other countries. It can take something even more valuable than your money. It can take your life. You're about to meet a doctor who fell into the trap. Let's take a look at this.
At this point in this experience, I had already given these people $60,000, or very close to that, maybe a touch more, and plus the expenses of phoning back and forth and all these faxes and things. So it was mounting up to the point now, and I realized this money is probably gone, and I'm never going to see anything else.
Some years ago, Dr. Axelson received a fax from Nigeria about some oil industry money. A lot of money.
Nigeria has been tagged as being the mecca for the 419 scam, but they are now, they've crossed all the borders. That's the thing about the internet. You can execute these scams from virtually anywhere. The victim does not come from any walk of life. They're not poor, and particularly, they're not particularly wealthy. They're not particularly well educated, and some of them are quite well educated. It is fascinating. It crosses all sections of life.
Often on these 419 scams, the victims will receive large amounts of documentation that appear to come from legitimate Nigerian government offices, such as the Central Bank of Nigeria or the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation. And the documents look official. They've got all sorts of stamps and signatures. But the fact of the matter is they're just bogus, fraudulent documents.
I received a fax from an official who claimed himself as a doctor, and he was an official from a group of people in Nigeria who had a bunch of money over there that was overcharges of contract situations with the oil industry. And they invited me to help them to get it out by allowing them to transfer these funds. It was $15.2 million into my account, and they were willing to share 30% of it with me. 60% went with them, and then 10% was to be allowed for expenses for both sides.
Within hours of replying to the fax, an endless wave of impressive-looking documents started coming to Dr. Axelson, and they kept coming for months on end.
The first time they asked me for money was they were going to send over 2 government officials from the Bank of Nigeria, plus my contact man in Nigeria, to come over here and finalize the delivery of this money to me in Canada.
At first, it seems to be a very clean transaction. Millions of dollars, I get a percentage, and all I need to do is to set up an account for this transaction.
Dr. Axelson was told that $2.8 million would be deposited into his account if we just helped get the money out of Nigeria. It was too tempting to resist, especially since he checked with his financial advisor and was told that what harm could it do just to check things out?
I'm not a millionaire by any way, shape, or form, and I take advantage of situations that might help improve my financial situation. And I looked upon this opportunity as one of those. At this point in this experience, I had already given these people $60,000, or very close to that, maybe a touch more. So it was mounting up to the point now, and I realized this money is probably gone, and I'm never going to see anything else.
They told him to bring another $20,000 for expenses and bring it to Amsterdam, where he would receive payment.
It was set up that I would go to Holland, where the money would be transferred to me in cash, because they couldn't wire it out anywhere. So they would secretively take the money to Holland and give it to me there. I had to bring along $20,000 US in cash to cover some of the costs of this transfer.
After arriving in Amsterdam, Dr. Axelson met with several men in an old building.
They opened up this big trunk. It had to be 3 feet long, 2 feet high, and 2 feet wide. And it was at least 2/3 or 3/4 full of American money, $100 bills. And they said, help yourself, fill your briefcase. Well, I looked at all this money, and I looked at them, and I figured, well, if I walk around Amsterdam with a briefcase full of money, first thing they're going to do is set me up for a robbery, and I would lose it all and maybe get hurt in the process, so I declined.
Amsterdam is one of the locations, but it's not the only one. What they do want to do is they want to control the environment. They don't want to come to your location, they want you coming to their location.
And I gave them the money, and then they went on their way.
The next day, a man calling himself Dr. Thompson Brown dropped another bombshell on Dr. Axelson.
Between my contact in Nigeria and this Mr. Brown, they could come up with $25,000 of this money, but I would have to come up with the rest.
Just give me the money. But I already gave it. You'll be rich.
I said, well, I can't come up with that just off the top of my head. I'll try and contact home and see what I can do.
In a fit of desperation, Dr. Axelson called his wife.
My wife wasn't having any part of this. She said to herself, there's just no way I'm going to come up with this money. I can't get this money for you.
Fortunately, his wife convinced him to come home and contact the police.
When we first met Dr. Axelson, he was still a believer that he was actually involved in a legitimate sort of investment. So what we did to convince him is we showed him all of the Nigerian advance fee letters that people had turned into us over the years.
They decided that maybe there's a way we can catch this rascal over there, but we have to have the help of the Amsterdam Police Department.
Most 419 scammers never get caught or go to jail, but not this time.
When I contacted him, this Mr. Brown, they went back to the same hotel that I was originally in and rented 2 rooms, one side by side with an adjoining door.
The plan that we had with Dr. Axelson and the Dutch authorities was to tell the suspects in Amsterdam that Dr. Axelson was returning with approximately $60,000 to make the next payment.
And the police had set it up so that I was to walk him down to the bottom, to the lobby, and when I shook his hand, that was the signal that that was the guy.
As Dr. Axelson was about to hand over the money, that's when the arrest was made.
Thompson Brown spent a year in an Amsterdam jail and then another 6 months behind bars in Canada, but there was more to come.
When Dr. Thompson Brown was arrested, he had a notebook on him, and the notebook contained all sorts of names and phone numbers of people all over the world. When I say all over the world, I mean everywhere from the United States to Papua New Guinea.
That notebook led them to a victim in upstate New York who had lost hundreds of thousands of dollars to Brown. And that cost him another 5 years in jail in the U.S.
I felt sorry for myself that I was such a sucker to get involved in such a scheme as this. But it was so convincing with all these documents and the malarkey that I was fed. It just fed my greed, I guess. And
it's a scam. Shred it, ignore it, rip it up. It's a complete and total scam.
Although Dr. Axelson found the sting exciting, he still feels the sting of the money he's lost. So how do you make sure that something like this doesn't happen to you or a family member? Take Craig Hannaford's advice and never respond to these type of offers, no matter how tempting they are.
unfortunately, I retired with a considerable debt, and I'm still trying to pay off that debt. So I'm still looking at entrepreneurial things, but not such dangerous ones.
Well, Craig Hannaford, this has been going on for 25 years. You've been in law enforcement for 25 years. How can this thing still keep working?
It's not going to stop working because as long as there are people out there who perhaps are a little bit greedy or looking for their ship to come in, it'll keep working.
Dr. Axelson is such a well-educated man. He's successful, run many businesses. How does a man like this get taken so far down the river?
Well, these fraudsters, they know how to play to human weakness. One human weakness is, of course, greed, and people will be chasing that money and do anything they can to get it.
Craig Hannaford, thanks very much for your work on this piece. We'll be back with more Fraud Squad TV right after this.
Have you or anyone you've known been the victim of a fraud or scam? Unfortunately, many of us have, and fraudsters rely on us letting our guard down. Email is a great way of communicating. It's fast and convenient, but we've become so used to it that we don't always use caution. An unbelievable 10% of people still click on embedded links in suspicious emails, and every time they do, they expose themselves to a variety of frauds. In this segment, Fraud Squad TV takes it to the street to hear some of your stories.
I have been defrauded. I had a lease, and so I was putting myself out on the internet, and I was posting sublease. I got an email from a girl that was saying that she was a model from Nigeria. I asked her if she was gonna come, and she said yes, and she needed me to send her $25,000 or $2,500 to buy a ticket to come over here. It was some really big, messed up story. I was this close. My dad went to the bank, got the check, was about to send it, and then I was like, this is too fishy, this is really weird. And then I did some research on the internet, and I found out that it was like a scam.
I myself haven't been defrauded, but my friend has, and he got his banking stuff actually defrauded. He got an email, he saw it like 3 in the morning, it said it was from bank. It's saying all this information, we're going to close your account if you don't give us all your information right now because of some sort of issue. I guess he was half asleep or whatever. Filled out everything. Next day, he had about $9,000 taken out of his line of credit, which was totally gone. I think he was out. He had no access to money for about 5 weeks while the bank investigated, but yeah, he was no money for 5 weeks. I had to support his ass. If the bank is really going to close your account, they're going to call you or they're going to tell you to come in. Don't ever do anything over the internet because if it's that serious, it wouldn't be done over the internet in the first place. Rip all your receipts up in the trash best you can so nobody can trace through it, and be smart with everything you do.
It's all about prevention. So never reply to an email that requests your personal information. Don't use links embedded in emails. Instead, go to the web page directly by typing the web address in your browser. And protect your computer with up-to-date antivirus software and spyware filters. I'm Naomi Joy for Fraud Squad TV.
Thanks for watching. Join us again next week for another episode of Fraud Squad TV.
That's what I want.